Hey, God bless you, my friend and sister Sharon. Today, I want to help answer a question. I received this question as an email very often. Can a person remarry after you have divorced a person you were committing adultery with? In other words, your spouse was already in a covenant marriage. Their spouse is still living, and you were their second or third marriage. First, let's consider something very sobering that Jesus said would be taking place when he returns. Matthew chapter 24 and 37, Jesus said, just as it was in the day of Noah, so shall it be when he returns. The thing that is most sobering, friends, is that during the time that God allowed the flood to come on the earth and destroy humanity, only one family walked up on that ark, and that was Noah's family. So friends, we must know and understand and never forget it. God is not desperate for humanity. He is self-existing. He does not need us. He wants us to be with him. He wants us to make it. He wants us to obey him, my friends. And so with that said, we must consider adultery is a rampant sin, and it is very shocking how many people are willing to risk their salvation over sex. That's what it is. It is sex with someone else's covenant spouse. Friends, Jesus said, as it was in the day of Noah, there are going to be many people given unto marriage, marrying, and that's what we see happening. Everybody's just marrying everybody's spouse. Their spouse is still alive. There's no merit to their divorces whatsoever in the sight of God and according to the scriptures. Now, listen and follow me very closely. Humans have a tendency to do exactly what Isaiah warned in the 5th chapter, verse 20. He said, woe unto them that call good evil and evil good, and gives over light for darkness, and they want the darkness and call it light. Isaiah said, woe to you. You need to be warned. And that's what is happening, friends. Before I answer this question, I want you to consider two areas that are rampant where mortals are calling it good, just like going to a civil court to be married to someone else's spouse. You could get a marriage certificate and marry someone else's spouse, and in the sight of humans, it's called a marriage. But in the sight of God, it is adultery. No different than sorcery, which we can find in Revelation chapter 21, verse 8. Jesus tells us point blank that all sorcerers will be cast into the lake of fire. When we do the etymology of the word sorcery, we find that it comes from the Latin word, which is pharmakia, or the Greek rather, which is a person who practices making potions. And this is where if you digest, if you inhale, if you put in your veins, any potion that takes your mind and body captive, it is sorcery. Nonetheless, mortals have legalized smoking weed, which is sorcery. When you inhale the cannabis plant, it gets you high. It puts you in a stupor, friends. And in the sight of God, it is sorcery. Nonetheless, just like adulterous marriages that are legalized through civil court, so is sorcery in many states here in the United States of America, just as it is where mortals call the sin of perversion, they call it good. But in the sight of God, it is evil for two women to lie with one another and practice perverted sex, just as it is for two men to lie with one another. According to scripture, Leviticus chapter 20, verse 13, God said, he told Moses, if you catch any men lying with one another as if they are lying with a woman, you are to stone both of them to death. Follow me, my friends. He said, for both of them commit an abomination. It is an abomination for two women or two men to have sexual intercourse, it's not really intercourse with a woman because, but my point is, friends, it is sin and mortals are calling it good. So to answer the question, can a person who has been civilly married in the sight of mortals to someone else's living spouse depart that quote marriage and remarry someone else the right way? Someone who has never been married, someone who, that person has never been married. And if they have, their spouse passed away, you can marry. Because in the sight of God, you was never married. You were committing the sin of adultery. So when you depart from the sin of adultery and you walk away from that person whose living spouse is still living, and you were having sex with that person's husband or their wife, and you are now departing. Friends, in the sight of God, you are repenting. You are turning and going the other way. And if you meet someone and she is, or he is, they've never been married or their spouse had passed away, friend, you could marry in the sight of God because you are no longer committing adultery. It wasn't a marriage, friend. Mortals call it that, but in the sight of God, he calls it adultery. Enough said with that, friends. But let us be reminded, adultery is listed in the Holy Scriptures 52 times it is mentioned. And when you put that with the sobering words of Jesus, that as it was in the days of Noah, they were given unto marriage, just as we are right now, marrying anybody, everybody, person, listen, whether it's your second marriage, third marriage, friends, if your spouse is still living, according to the scriptures, you are still bound to the covenant. And I know things get very difficult when you start discussing these topics, but friends, our eternal salvation, it is the most important asset we have through Jesus Christ. It is your everything, your salvation. And at the end of the day, no sex is worth losing your soul. There is no sex, friend. There is no comfort of living in a beautiful suburban home, having a good job, having, you and your adulterous spouse. It doesn't matter how, great school system you have for your children. Sexual sin with someone else's spouse can cost you your soul. So for those of you that are coming out and those of you that want to get out, friends, it's worth it, because eternity is forever and it's final. And I cannot stress enough, my friend, to go and read the words of Jesus. Matthew chapter 24, verse 37. God bless.